My name is Naya. I am 32 years old, and I finally saved $120,000 for a house down payment when my mother stormed into my office. In front of my high-level colleagues, she slammed a crumpled bank statement onto my desk and ordered me to cancel my house contract. She demanded that I use that money to bail my sister out of jail first. I paused, smiled, stood up, and delivered a single line that left everyone completely speechless. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect your peace from family members who constantly underestimated your worth. It was a Tuesday morning in downtown Atlanta. My office, a sleek glass-walled corner suite on the 40th floor, represented everything I had bled for over the past 10 years. As the vice president of operations at a premier logistics firm, I did not just work my way up the corporate ladder. I built my own steps. The morning sun reflected off the polished mahogany conference table where I sat with two of our largest prospective investors, Mr. Sterling and Ms. Davis. We were deep into a multi-million-dollar supply chain expansion negotiation. The atmosphere was professional, hushed, and respectful. I was in my element presenting quarterly projections on the digital whiteboard, feeling the absolute peak of my career. For a girl who grew up constantly told she was the selfish, difficult child, this room was my ultimate validation. Then the peace shattered. It started as a muffled commotion beyond the thick glass walls of my suite. I could see our young receptionist, a sweet girl named Maya, looking frantic as she backed away from the elevator banks. Through the frosted glass panels, a familiar, chaotic silhouette pushed forward. It was my mother, Brenda. She was putting on her absolute best Sunday church performance, weaponizing her tears and loud prayers. "Lord Jesus, help my family. My babies are in trouble," she wailed loudly enough for the entire executive floor to hear. She violently batted away the hands of the bewildered security guard, who was clearly too afraid to physically restrain an older, crying black woman. She used his hesitation to her full advantage, bulldozing her way down the quiet executive corridor. I stopped mid-sentence. Mr. Sterling and Miss Davis turned their heads in absolute shock as the heavy glass door of my office was violently shoved open. It hit the wall stopper with a loud thud that echoed through the room. My mother stood in the doorway, breathing heavily, clutching her oversized leather purse. She wore her Sunday best, a bright floral dress that seemed entirely out of place in a room full of tailored navy and gray suits. She did not even acknowledge the executive sitting at the table. She marched straight to the head of the conference table, reached deep into her purse, and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. With a dramatic, aggressive sweep of her arm, she slammed it directly over my presentation notes. It was a bank statement, my personal, private bank statement. The bold black ink at the bottom glared up at me, showing a savings balance of exactly $120,000. "Cancel your house contract right now," she demanded, her voice carrying the sharp, authoritative tone she used to terrorize me as a child. "I need you to wire every single cent of this to the Fulton County Jail. Chloe and Darius were arrested this morning, and this money is going to bail them out and pay for their federal defense lawyers." The silence in the room was deafening. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat nervously, his eyes darting between me and the unhinged woman leaning over my desk. Miss Davis looked like she wanted to melt into the floorboards. The humiliation was a physical weight on my chest, hot and suffocating. This was the exact dynamic I had spent my entire adult life trying to escape. The blatant disregard for my boundaries, the public spectacle, the absolute entitlement to everything I had built for myself. But I was no longer the frightened little girl who used to hide in her bedroom to avoid her mother's wrath. I was the vice president of operations. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the cool, air-conditioned air of the office steady my racing heart. I did not yell. I did not cry. I looked at the bank statement, then up at my mother's furious, expectant face. I calmly closed my laptop. "Mr. Sterling." "Miss Davis," I said, my voice steady and completely devoid of the panic my mother desperately wanted to invoke. "I sincerely apologize for this unprecedented interruption. Please excuse me for a moment. My assistant will escort you to the executive lounge downstairs, and we will resume this discussion in exactly 15 minutes. I stood up, smoothing the front of my tailored blazer, projecting an aura of absolute control. The investors, sensing the radioactive tension in the room, quickly gathered their portfolios and stood up. I walked them to the door, offering a tight professional smile, and handed them off to my stunned assistant, who was hovering nervously in the hallway. Once they were safely out of earshot, I stepped back into my office. I grabbed the heavy chrome handle of the glass door and pulled it shut. The magnetic lock clicked into place with a sharp, final sound. I reached over and twisted the privacy blinds, sealing us off from the prying eyes of the entire 40-floor bullpen. We were completely alone. The corporate facade dropped, and the raw, ugly reality of my family dynamic took over. "How did you get this?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper as I pointed a manicured finger at the crumpled bank statement on my desk. My mother scoffed, waving her hand dismissively as if committing federal mail fraud was a casual Tuesday morning activity. "Oh, stop being so dramatic, Nia. It came to the house. I opened it because I am your mother and I have a right to know what my children are doing." She crossed her arms, thrusting her chin forward in that familiar stance of absolute self-righteousness. I could not believe the audacity. I had changed my mailing address months ago, but the bank must have mistakenly sent a quarterly summary to my old address at her house. And instead of forwarding it to me, she tore it open. "You opened my private mail." I stated, the anger simmering just below the surface. But my mother was not interested in my privacy or federal laws. She was on a holy crusade for her favorite child. "Do not try to change the subject." She snapped, her eyes flashing with indignant rage. "Your sister is sitting in a cold, filthy holding cell right now. Darius is locked up like a common criminal. And you are sitting up here in this glass tower playing boss, hoarding over $100,000 so you can buy a mansion? What kind of selfish, heartless person have I raised?" I leaned against the edge of my desk, crossing my ankles. "A mansion?" I asked quietly. "It is a 3-bedroom house in Smyrna, Mom. A house I have been saving for since I graduated college. A house I worked 80-hour weeks for missed holidays for and sacrificed my entire 20s for. It is my money. I earned it." My mother let out a loud, mocking laugh that grated against my nerves. "Earned it? You think you earned it all by yourself? You went to Howard University because I raised you. You have this job because of the strong black woman foundation I gave you. Family is everything, Nia. We are supposed to build generational wealth together. You think it is okay for you to live in luxury while your own flesh and blood loses everything. Generational wealth." I repeated, the bitter taste of the overused buzzword filling my mouth. Darius is not building generational wealth. Darius is a fraud who drives a rented Porsche and wears fake designer clothes to impress teenagers on the internet. And Chloe encourages him because she would rather pretend to be a rich housewife than get a real job. I am not draining my life savings to bail out 2 adults who made stupid, illegal choices. My mother slammed her hand violently on the mahogany table. "Do not speak about your brother-in-law that way. Darius is an entrepreneur. He takes risks. He is trying to elevate our community, not work for the white man like you do. He just ran into a little cash flow problem, and the system is targeting him because he is a successful black man." The delusion was absolutely staggering. My mother had always worshipped the ground Chloe walked on. Chloe was the beautiful, charismatic golden child who could do no wrong, while I was the quiet, studious scapegoat always expected to clean up their massive messes. When Chloe wanted a lavish wedding she could not afford, my mother aggressively pressured me to empty my emergency fund to pay for the catering. When Darius wanted to start his 3rd failed business, my mother secretly took out a second mortgage on her own fully paid-off home to fund his delusions. Now she was demanding I sacrifice my future, the one thing I had protected so fiercely, to save them from the legal consequences of their own actions. I shook my head, walking around to sit in my leather chair. "I'm not doing it, Mom. The answer is no. You can yell, you can pray, you can try to embarrass me in front of my investors, but you are not getting a single dime of my money. Go call a bail bondsman. Go sell your car. But leave my house fund alone." My mother stared at me, her chest heaving, her eyes narrowing into cold, calculating slits. She was not used to me standing my ground like this. For years I had kept the peace. I had paid the random bills she dropped on my lap. I had nodded along to her exhausting sermons about family duty. But this was the hard line. That $120,000 represented my freedom, my safety, and my ultimate escape from her toxic web. I was not going to hand it over to a scammer. "You are going to regret this, Nia," she hissed, her voice dripping with pure venom. "You think you are so untouchable up here. But God sees your selfish heart. He sees how you treat your own blood. Just wait until Darius gets here. He is going to explain everything, and you are going to write that check. Or so help me God. I will make sure everyone in our church, everyone in our entire family knows exactly what kind of traitor you really are." I frowned, the confident rhythm in my chest suddenly wavering. "Wait, what do you mean until Darius gets here? I thought he was locked in a holding cell." My mother offered a sickening, triumphant smile. She reached into her purse and pulled out her cell phone. "He posted temporary bail an hour ago. And he is already in the building. He is already in the building." Those words hung in the air, chilling me to the bone. Darius was not just out of jail. He had come straight to my workplace to shake me down, and my own mother was his advanced scout. I immediately reached for my desk phone to call building security, but my mother slammed her purse down directly over the receiver. "You will do no such thing," she hissed, her eyes wide and manic. "You are not going to humiliate this family any further. You are going to sit down, open that laptop, and do what God commands you to do." "God does not command me to fund a criminal enterprise, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Move your bag." She did not budge. Instead, she launched into the exact kind of psychological warfare she had perfected over 3 decades. This was her element. She paced in front of my desk, waving her hands, her voice taking on the rhythmic preaching cadence she used when she wanted to manipulate a room. "You have grown so cold, Nia." So arrogant, she began shaking her head in exaggerated disappointment. "You sit up here in this glass tower with your fancy title looking down on your own blood. You think you are better than us because you work for these corporate white folks. But you forgot where you came from. You forgot the community that raised you." Pastor Thomas was just talking about this on Sunday. He said the greatest sin of the modern Black professional is turning their back on their village. You are the exact person he was warning us about. A woman who gets a little bit of money and suddenly acts like she has no family. I felt my jaw tighten. I did not turn my back on anyone. I built a boundary to protect myself from exactly this. "Boundary," she scoffed, practically spitting the word out. "That is just a therapist word for being selfish. The Bible says to whom much is given, much is required. You have $120,000 just sitting in a bank account doing nothing. Your sister is weeping in a concrete cell right now. Your brother-in-law is facing federal charges. And you are talking about boundaries. You are talking about a house. Houses can wait, Nia. Family cannot." I kept my hands firmly folded in my lap, refusing to even glance at my laptop. "You are twisting religion to justify theft, Mom." Chloe and Darius did not make a mistake. They committed federal fraud. And do not talk to me about community. What community are they helping? Darius spends his time popping bottles at VIP clubs in Buckhead and buying imported cars. That is not community building. That is a grift. My mother slammed her hands on my desk, leaning in close. "You do not understand Black entrepreneurship. You never have. You have always been too scared to take a risk. Darius is a visionary. He is building a financial empire for us. He is creating true generational wealth. He just needs capital to get through this rough patch. The system is rigged against Black men trying to make it. And instead of supporting him, you are acting like his oppressor." I let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "Generational wealth. Is that what Darius calls it? Because from where I am sitting, he is destroying the only real wealth this family ever had." My mother stood up straight, her eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" I looked her dead in the eye. "I know about the house in Fairfield, Mom. I know you took out a second mortgage on the house that Grandma and Grandpa worked their entire lives to pay off. You risked the only actual asset our family owned so Darius could fund his fake blockchain real estate company. You gave him $200,000 of Grandma's equity, and he blew it in 6 months. For a split second, the righteous anger dropped from her face, replaced by genuine shock. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I had not told her I knew about the mortgage. I had discovered it by accident a few months ago when I was helping her set up her online property tax payments. I saw the massive new lien against the property. "You have no right to snoop through my finances," she finally stammered, her voice losing its preaching cadence. "That is my house. I can do whatever I want with it." "And this is my money," I shot back, pointing at the crumpled bank statement. "But the difference is I actually earned mine. When I got accepted into Howard University, what did you do? You told me I was abandoning you. You told me I was acting too good for my raising. You refused to co-sign a single student loan. You refused to send me a $20 care package. I took out $80,000 in loans under my own name. I worked night shifts at a diner in Washington, D.C., smelling like grease and bleach, studying for my logistics exams at 2 in the morning. I paid for my own textbooks. I paid my own rent. I built my own wealth. Where was my generational wealth, Mom? Where was my village? You were always too independent for your own good," she fired back desperately, trying to regain the upper hand. "You never asked for help. You just up and left. Chloe stayed. Chloe needed me." "Chloe did not need you, she used you," I corrected her. "And now she is married to a man who uses both of you. You gave Darius the equity from Grandma's house. And what did he do with it? Did he build a business? No. He bought a Porsche. He bought Chloe a closet full of Hermes bags. He leased a high-rise apartment he could not afford. He is not a businessman. He is a con artist playing dress-up." "He is your family!" she screamed, her composure completely shattering. "He is trying to break the curse of poverty, and you are sitting here tearing him down. You are just jealous. You are 32 years old, single, and sitting alone in a glass box. Chloe has a husband. She has a life. You have nothing but a bank account. You think money is going to keep you warm at night. You think this company cares about you." The cruelty in her words was designed to cut me down to the bone. This was her signature move. Whenever logic failed her, she attacked my relationship status, my femininity, my worth as a woman. For years, those words would have made me crumble. They would have made me reach for my wallet just to prove I had value, just to buy a scrap of her approval. But today, looking at her desperate, sweating face, I felt nothing but pity. "This company pays me $250,000 a year, Mom. They respect my boundaries. They respect my expertise. That is more than I can say for my own mother." She pointed a trembling finger at my face. "You open that laptop right now. You log into your bank. If you do not wire that money to Darius today, I am calling Pastor Thomas. I am calling your Aunt Beatrice. I am calling everyone. I will tell them you are a selfish, wicked girl who let her sister rot in a jail cell while you bought a mansion. You will be dead to this family. You will not be welcome at Thanksgiving. You will not be welcome at Christmas. You will be entirely alone." I leaned back in my leather chair, crossing my arms over my chest. I stared at her, my face completely impassive. "Go ahead," I said calmly. "Call them. Call Pastor Thomas and tell him you mortgaged Grandma's house to fund a crypto scam. Call Aunt Beatrice and tell her your son-in-law was arrested for federal wire fraud. Tell them the whole truth, Mom. Let us see how much the village respects you after they find out you are bankrupt and your golden child is a felon." She gasped, her hand flying to her chest as if I had physically struck her. "You are a monster," she whispered. "No, I am just the only person in this family who refuses to be your victim anymore." I turned my chair slightly facing the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Atlanta skyline. "I am not opening my laptop. I am not logging into my bank. I am not giving you or Darius a single dime. Now you can either walk out of my office quietly, or I will hit the panic button under my desk and have building security drag you out in front of my entire department. It is your choice." My mother stood frozen, her chest heaving, her eyes darting frantically around the room. She was looking for a weakness, a crack in my armor, a sign that the guilt trip was working. But she found nothing. I was an absolute fortress. She had played all her cards. She had used God, the community, the family legacy, and my own insecurities against me, and I had simply swatted them away. Before she could launch another desperate attack, a heavy rhythmic knocking echoed against the glass of my office door. The sound was arrogant, demanding, and entirely too familiar. I turned my chair back around. Standing on the other side of the frosted glass, completely ignoring my assistant, who was frantically trying to stop him, was a tall man in a tailored royal blue suit. Darius had arrived, and he looked like a man who was ready to collect. Before my assistant could even swipe her badge to secure the area, the heavy glass door was yanked open. Darius strolled in. He did not run. He did not hurry like a panicked husband whose wife was currently sitting in a miserable county jail cell. He strolled. He was wearing a ridiculously tight royal blue tailored suit that practically screamed new money, or in his case, stolen money. The overpowering stench of expensive cologne hit the air-conditioned room, a thick cloud of sandalwood and bergamot that immediately gave me a headache. On his wrist, a massive gold watch caught the overhead fluorescent lights. It was flashy, obnoxious, and almost certainly a cheap knockoff. He had slipped past the lobby security guards by taking the freight elevator from the underground parking garage. It was a sneaky trick my mother must have taught him when she first scouted my building. He looked completely unbothered by the federal charges hanging over his head. There was no shame in his eyes, no panic, no remorse. He smiled a wide, blindingly white smile that he had probably financed with his fraudulent business loans. "What is good?" Family Darius said, clapping his hands together slowly as he surveyed my executive office. "Look at this place. Not bad for a corporate slave, Nia." I stood up, my hands planting firmly on the polished wood of my desk. "Get out of my office, Darius. You do not belong here." He ignored me completely. Instead of leaving, he walked deeper into my workspace, treating my sanctuary like it was his own personal playground. He ran a hand along the edge of my mahogany conference table, then picked up a crystal logistics award I had won the previous year. He tossed it lightly in the air and caught it, leaving greasy fingerprints on the pristine glass. He walked over to my bookshelf and started touching my framed diplomas, completely disrespecting the boundaries of my professional space. "Careful now, sister-in-law," Darius said, setting the award down dangerously close to the edge of the table. "We are all on the same team here. Brenda, you can wait outside. The adults need to talk business." My mother, who had been breathing fire just a moment ago, immediately softened at the sight of her golden son-in-law. She nodded obediently, grabbing her oversized purse. "You tell her, Darius. You make her understand the big picture," she whispered reverently, before slipping out of the office and pulling the heavy glass door shut behind her. Once we were alone, Darius dropped the friendly family man act. He walked right around my desk, invading my personal space. I refused to back away. He leaned against the edge of my desk, crossing his legs at the ankles, showing off a pair of bright red bottom loafers that I knew for a fact were purchased with stolen relief funds. He picked up my expensive fountain pen and began twirling it between his fingers, looking down at me with absolute arrogance. "Let us cut the nonsense, Nia," he began, his voice dripping with condescension. "Your mother tells me you are sitting on $120,000 in liquid cash. That is cute. It is a nice little nest egg for someone who works a standard 9 to 5. But right now, I need that liquidity to solve a temporary cash flow roadblock." I stared at him in pure disgust. A cash flow roadblock. "You were arrested for federal wire fraud, Darius. You stole government money, and your wife, my sister, is currently locked in a holding cell wearing an orange jumpsuit. How are you even standing in my office right now?" Darius waved his hand dismissively, scoffing, as if I had just brought up a minor parking ticket. "Please, the feds are just hating on a successful Black entrepreneur. They see a visionary building true wealth outside their controlled system, and they panic. I posted a signature bond to get out. It is standard procedure for white-collar misunderstandings. As for Chloe, she is fine. A few hours in holding builds character. She knows her husband is out here moving chess pieces to secure our empire." His sheer narcissism was breathtaking. He had left his wife sitting in jail while he came here to extort me. "I am not giving you my money to secure your fake empire," I said, my voice steady and cold. Darius sighed loudly, shaking his head with a condescending smirk. "This is the problem with you, Nia. You have a worker bee mentality. You are a slave to the white man and his clock. You come here, you punch in, you punch out, and you think you understand high-level finance because they gave you a fancy title. Vice President of Operations. What does that even mean? You operate their machines. You make them rich while you settle for a salary and a pat on the head. I am an owner. I understand the velocity of money. I understand return on investment. I understand blockchain scalability and fiat currency manipulation. He was throwing out financial buzzwords that made absolutely no sense in this context. He leaned closer, tapping the side of his head as if he were bestowing incredible wisdom upon a child. You see, this $120,000 is stagnant in your savings account. It is losing value to inflation every single day. By injecting it into my portfolio, you are not just bailing me out. You are investing in a diversified asset class. You are keeping the wealth inside the family. I am a vice president of operations for a national logistics firm, I replied, my tone razor sharp. I manage a quarterly budget of $50 million. I audit international supply chains, I project global market yields, and I oversee the financial efficiency of 3,000 employees. Do not stand in my office wearing a cheap suit bought with stolen tax dollars and try to explain inflation to me. You are a con artist, Darius. Nothing more. Darius lost his smile for a fraction of a second, but his massive ego quickly recovered. He chuckled a dry, humorless sound. Words on a resume. Nia. But you are missing the bigger picture. The feds moved fast this morning. They put a temporary freeze on all my domestic accounts. It is a standard intimidation tactic. Haters trying to starve me out so I cannot afford top-tier legal representation. So I cannot have you wire that money to the police station or any of my regular banks in Atlanta. He reached into the breast pocket of his suit and pulled out a crisp, folded piece of paper. He flicked it open with a dramatic snap of his wrist and pushed it across my mahogany desk. I need you to wire the $120,000 to this routing number, Darius commanded, tapping the paper with his index finger. It is an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, completely secure, untouchable by the IRS or the FBI. Once the funds clear internationally, my private attorney will facilitate the legal retainer and post Chloe out on permanent bail. I looked at the piece of paper, then back up at his smug face. Are you completely out of your mind? You want me to wire my life savings to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands while you are under active federal investigation? That is textbook money laundering, Darius. It is a federal felony. It is wealth protection. He snapped, his voice finally losing its calm, arrogant cadence and raising an octave. It is what the top 1% do every single day, but you are too brainwashed by your corporate masters to see it. You think the rules apply to everyone equally in this country. Wake up, Nia. If we play by their rules, we lose. I am perfectly awake, I said, picking up the piece of paper by the very corner and dropping it back onto the edge of the desk. The answer is no. I am not funding your criminal defense. I am not paying for your rented lifestyle. And I am certainly not participating in your money laundering scheme. Darius pushed himself off the edge of my desk, his physical presence suddenly becoming much more aggressive. He was a tall, heavily built man, and he used his size to try and physically intimidate me. He stepped so close I could see the nervous sweat forming on his forehead, despite the cool air conditioning of my office. You are not listening to me, Nia, he growled, pointing a thick finger directly at my face. This is not a request. This is a family mandate. I am the head of this family financial future. Your mother understands that. Chloe understands that. You are the only one standing in the way of our collective success. There is no collective success, I fired back, refusing to break eye contact or take a single step backward. There is only you draining everyone around you so you can play pretend on social media. You ruined my mother credit. You jeopardized the home she owns. And now you are trying to drag me down with you. Get out of my office before I have building security throw you out onto the street. Darius laughed, but it was a dark, menacing sound. Throw me out. You are not going to do that, because you care way too much about this pristine little corporate image you have built for yourself. You call security, they drag a black man out of here in handcuffs, and suddenly, the vice president of operations is the center of a messy ghetto family drama. You do not want these white executives in your business like that. You are too ashamed of us. You are too scared of looking bad. He was trying to play on the exact fears I had battled my whole life. The fear of being stereotyped, the fear of my family, chaotic reality bleeding into my quiet professional sanctuary. But his manipulation was transparent, cheap, and utterly pathetic. I am not ashamed of where I come from, Darius. I am ashamed of you, I said evenly. Darius slammed both of his hands down on my desk, the loud crack echoing violently off the glass walls. Listen to me, you arrogant, stuck-up corporate puppet, he spat, dropping all pretense of being the sophisticated, wealthy businessman. You think you hold all the cards because you have a little bit of cash saved up. You think you can just say no and watch me fall. He leaned in until we were practically nose to nose, his breath hot and smelling of stale coffee and pure desperation. You are going to log into that computer right now. You are going to enter that Cayman Islands routing number. And you are going to hit send. Because if you do not, I promise you, I will make sure you lose everything. I will make sure your precious corporate career, your little house fund, and your entire flawless reputation burn to the ground right alongside me. I did not flinch. I did not blink. I just looked at him with absolute icy contempt. You are completely out of your league, Darius. We will see about that, he sneered, his eyes flashing with a desperate, dangerous light. He straightened his suit jacket, pulling at the lapels as if trying to regain his composure. Because if you will not do it for family loyalty, you will do it for your own survival. Just as the threat left his lips, the heavy glass door of my office swung open again. My mother practically stumbled into the room, her eyes darting between the two of us. She had clearly been pressing her ear against the frosted glass. I heard shouting, she announced, her voice pitched high with nervous energy. What is happening? Darius, did you make her understand? Is she sending the money? Darius quickly adjusted his suit jacket, pasting that fake, confident smile back onto his face. We are just getting on the same page, Brenda. Nia was just about to log into her portal and initiate the wire transfer. Right, Nia. He stared at me, his eyes dead and threatening. I did not say a word. I simply held his gaze, walked around my large mahogany desk, and sat down in my leather chair. My mother let out a loud, dramatic sigh of relief, clasping her hands together and looking up at the ceiling. Thank you, Jesus, she whispered loudly. I knew you would do the right thing. I knew you would not turn your back on your own sister. I reached out and touched the trackpad of my laptop. The large 32-inch curved monitor on my desk flared to life. I did not open my banking application. I did not log into my personal savings portal. Instead, I clicked on a heavily encrypted password-protected folder sitting right in the center of my desktop. I typed in my security credentials with rapid, deliberate keystrokes. What are you doing? Darius asked, his tone suddenly dropping its arrogant edge, replaced by a slight tremor of suspicion. The routing number is right there on the desk. You do not need to pull up any extra files to send a wire. I ignored him. I opened a massive PDF document, maximized it on the screen, and then physically grabbed the edges of the large monitor. I turned the screen completely around so it faced both Darius and my mother. If I am going to invest $120,000 into your business empire, Darius, I think it is only fair that I review your financials first, I said, my voice dripping with icy professionalism. After all, you are a visionary. You understand the velocity of money. So let us take a look at your portfolio. Darius stepped closer to the screen, his jaw tightening. My mother hovered right behind his shoulder, squinting at the dense spreadsheets and highlighted bank records displayed brightly in high definition. What is this? She asked, her voice faltering. These are the receipts, I stated flatly. I am a vice president of operations, Darius. Did you really think I would not run a background check on a man who took $200,000 of my grandmother equity and turned it into zero? You see, I have friends in corporate auditing. And when you got arrested this morning, I made a few phone calls. So let us dissect this high-level business you have been running. Darius shifted his weight, his eyes darting frantically across the screen. You hacked into my private documents. That is illegal, Nia. Turn that off right now. These are public records and federal court filings, I corrected him sharply. And they tell a very interesting story. Let us start with your company Apex Global Solutions, registered as an LLC in the state of Georgia in April of 2020. According to these federal loan applications, you claim to have 14 full-time employees on payroll. You stated your monthly payroll expenses were exactly $45,000. I scrolled down to the next page, revealing a bright red highlighted section. But here's the problem, Darius. You do not have 14 employees. You do not have any employees. You used the social security numbers of random people, including 2 deceased members of our own church, to file fraudulent W-2 forms. You submitted those forged documents to the Small Business Administration to secure a Paycheck Protection Program loan. You stole federal relief funds meant to keep struggling businesses alive during a global crisis. My mother gasped, taking a step back. Darius, what is she talking about? You told me you got a government grant for minority business owners. He did not get a grant, Mom. He committed federal wire fraud. I said, not letting Darius get a single word in to defend himself. I scrolled to the next page, pulling up a detailed transaction ledger. And it gets better. Once the government wired that massive lump sum into the Apex Global Solutions business account, Darius was legally required to spend at least 60% of it on payroll and utilities. But let us look at where the capital actually went. I pointed a pen at the screen. 4 days after the funds cleared, there is an outgoing wire of $85,000 to a luxury car dealership in Buckhead. That is the down payment for the Porsche Panamera you drove here today. 2 weeks later, a transaction for $32,000 at the Hermes boutique in Phipps Plaza. That explains the Birkin bag Chloe was flaunting at Thanksgiving. And here, continuous weekly charges ranging from $3,000 to $5,000 at Compound and Gold Room. You were using taxpayer money to buy out VIP sections and purchase bottles of champagne at Atlanta nightclubs. Darius was visibly sweating now. The confident, threatening aura he had projected just moments ago was rapidly evaporating. He aggressively pointed a finger at the screen, his voice rising in panic. You do not know what you are looking at. Those are legitimate business expenses. The car is a company vehicle for client transport. The bags were corporate gifts for high-net-worth investors. And the clubs, that is networking. That is where deals get made. You have to spend money to make money. You have to project an image of success to attract real capital. Corporate gifts. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You bought a hot pink leather handbag for your wife. Who was the high-net-worth investor Darius Chloe? She does not even have a job. You did not buy a company vehicle. You bought a status symbol because you are terrified of looking broke. It is called client acquisition cost, Darius yelled, slamming his hand down on the edge of my desk. He was desperately throwing out business terms, hoping something would stick. I am building a brand. I am establishing a lifestyle marketing firm. I am diversifying assets into decentralized finance. I had to move that liquidity into crypto wallets to protect it from centralized banking inflation. You are looking at a snapshot, Nia. You are not seeing the blockchain integrations. You are not seeing the smart contracts I was developing. Blockchain smart contracts. I repeated, my voice rising to match his volume. Do not stand in my office and insult my intelligence with tech bro garbage. You do not even know how to code. You bought a luxury car, expensive purses, and overpriced liquor. There is no business. There is no product. There is no service. You are a thief. And now the federal government wants their money back. My mother suddenly pushed past Darius, slamming her hands down on my desk. Stop it, she screamed. Her face flushed dark red with anger and denial. Stop trying to tear him down. You are just trying to confuse me with all these numbers and spreadsheets because you are cheap, and you do not want to help your family. Mom, look at the screen. I pleaded, gesturing to the undeniable proof right in front of her. The bank statements do not lie. He took government money and spent it on himself. He is facing federal prison time. My mother refused to even look at the monitor. She stubbornly crossed her arms and glared at me. I do not need to look at your fake computer papers. Darius explained this to me already. He is a CEO. He has to look successful to get investors, Nia. That is how the real world works. You do not understand high-level business because you are just an employee. You just sit at a desk and do what the white man tells you to do. Darius is a boss. He is taking risks. Sometimes when you take risks, the government gets confused about the paperwork. The sheer level of her delusion was staggering. She was staring at undeniable documented proof of grand larceny, and she was choosing to believe the man wearing the fake gold watch. She was willing to let me drain my life savings to protect a man who had lied to her face for years. Confused about the paperwork, I asked in absolute disbelief. Mom, the FBI does not kick down your front door at 6 in the morning because they are confused about paperwork. They arrested him because he is a criminal. He is your brother, she fired back, her voice echoing shrilly against the glass walls. And Chloe is your sister. She is innocent in all of this. Even if Darius made a mistake with his accounting, Chloe did not do anything wrong. She is sitting in a jail cell because of his business. You have to bail her out. You cannot leave her in there. She is not innocent, I corrected my mother, my tone turning to absolute ice. Chloe is the vice president of Apex Global Solutions. She signed the loan documents right alongside him. She knew exactly where the money was coming from when she was carrying that $30,000 bag. She is an accessory to federal fraud. Darius stepped forward, his face contorted in rage. Keep my wife's name out of your mouth. You do not know anything about our marriage or our business. I know you are both going to federal prison, I replied calmly. And I know you are not getting a single dime from me to pay for your defense lawyers. Darius let out a low, dangerous growl. He reached into his suit jacket again. You think you are so smart, Nia. You think you have this all figured out with your little spreadsheets. But you forgot one very important detail. I told you I came here to collect, and I am not leaving empty-handed. He pulled out a thick, folded legal document and slammed it down onto the glass surface of my desk. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet office. He dragged the document across the mahogany wood until it rested right in front of me, right on top of my own bank statement. Read it, he commanded, his voice dropping to a sinister whisper. Read it and tell me how smart you are. Because if I go down for this, I am dragging you straight to hell with me. I looked down at the document. The bold, black lettering at the top of the page made my blood run absolutely cold. It was not a bank statement. It was not a loan application. It was a legally binding contract. And at the bottom of the page, perfectly forged in blue ink, was my signature. I stared at the looping letters of my own name, a perfect replication of how I signed my corporate approvals. The document was a legally binding corporate guarantor agreement. By placing my forged signature on that line, Darius had legally tied my pristine credit score, my personal assets, and my entire financial identity to his fraudulent shell company. I did not scream. I did not throw the paper back at him. I simply lifted my eyes from the forged signature and looked at my mother. I expected to see shock. I expected to see the righteous, God-fearing woman she pretended to be finally draw a line at felony identity theft. I waited for her to turn to Darius and demand an explanation for why he had stolen her oldest daughter's identity. Instead, she looked completely unfazed. Her expression was hard, her jaw set in a stubborn line. She knew. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. She already knew about the forgery. You knew about this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, the horror bleeding into every syllable. You knew he stole my identity to secure a fraudulent loan. My mother dropped the frantic praying act entirely. The mask of the concerned Christian mother shattered, revealing the vicious, calculating woman underneath. She took a step forward, placing herself squarely between me and Darius, acting as his physical and emotional shield. Oh, stop using such dramatic words, Nia, she snapped, waving her hand in my face. Nobody stole anything. You are family. Family shares resources. You have an 800 credit score just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. You were not using it. Darius needed a guarantor to get his business off the ground. He is the man of the house and he needed leverage. He just borrowed your good name to build something for all of us. Borrowed my name, I repeated, my voice rising in utter disbelief. He committed a federal crime. He committed identity theft and bank fraud. If his company defaults, the federal government will come after everything I own. They will seize the $120,000 I saved. They will garnish my wages. They will ruin my entire life. And whose fault is that? My mother screamed, her voice echoing violently off the glass walls of my office. Her face contorted into an ugly, hateful sneer. It is your fault. If you were not so incredibly selfish, he would not have had to find a workaround. If you had just supported his vision from the beginning, if you had just written the check when he asked you months ago, we would not be in this situation. You forced his hand, Nia. I sat frozen in my chair. My own mother was standing in my office justifying federal identity theft and blaming me for being the victim of it. You are just jealous, she spat, leaning over my desk, her eyes wide and manic. That is what this is really about. This is not about the law. This is not about some fake spreadsheets you pulled up on your computer. This is about the fact that you have been jealous of your sister since the day she was born. You have always hated Chloe because she has everything you will never have. I stared at her, the breath knocked completely out of my lungs. My mother did not stop. She leaned into the cruelty, clearly eager to finally say the thing she had been holding back for years. She pointed a sharp, accusing finger directly at my chest. Look at yourself, Nia. You are 32 years old. You have no husband. You have no children. You have no prospect of a real family. You come to this sterile, freezing glass box every single day, and you boss people around, and you actually think that makes you a woman. You think this title on your door means anything in the real world. Her words were designed to be lethal. She was taking every societal pressure, every insecurity I had ever confided in her during my weaker moments in my 20s, and weaponizing them against me. Chloe is a real woman, my mother continued, her voice dripping with venomous pride. Chloe has a husband who takes risks to provide for her. Chloe has a man who wants to shower her with beautiful things. Darius buys her designer bags and takes her on vacations because she knows how to be soft. She knows how to let a man lead. But you are hard, Naya. You are cold, you are stubborn, and you are bitter. No man wants to deal with your attitude. No man wants a woman who constantly tries to prove she is the smartest person in the room. That is why you are sitting here all alone with your little bank account trying to destroy your sister's marriage. You want her to be as miserable and lonely as you are. I felt a tight, agonizing, burning sensation in my throat, but I refused to let a single tear fall. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. You think this job loves you? She mocked, gesturing wildly around my executive office. You think these white corporate executives care about you? When you are lying in a hospital bed, is this logistics company going to hold your hand? When you are old and alone, is this mahogany desk going to comfort you? Your family is the only thing that is real. And you are sitting here trying to send the only family you have to federal prison over some petty jealousy. It is not jealousy, Mom, I managed to say, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts to keep it steady. It is the law. They are criminals. I do not care about the law. She roared, slamming both of her fists onto my desk. I care about my blood. And if you do not honor that paper Darius just put on your desk, I am going to make sure you have absolutely nothing left in this world. She stood up straight, her chest heaving, her eyes locked onto mine with a terrifying, destructive promise. I will ruin you, Naya. You think you have a pristine reputation in this city? You know exactly how small the black professional circle is in Atlanta. If you do not log into that computer and send that money to the Cayman Islands right now, I will leave this building and I will go straight to Pastor Thomas. She began pacing behind the chairs in my office, mapping out my social execution. I will stand up in the middle of testimony service this Sunday. I will take the microphone and I will tell the entire congregation that my oldest daughter is a traitor. I will tell them that you are a federal informant who set up her own brother-in-law because you were secretly in love with him and angry that he chose your sister. My stomach violently turned. The sheer depravity of the lie she was willing to tell made me feel physically sick. You would not do that, I whispered. Try me, she hissed, spinning around to face me. I will call Aunt Beatrice. I will call Uncle Marcus. I will call every single woman in my sorority graduate chapter. I will tell them that you forged those documents yourself to frame Darius. I will tell them you stole the money from his business and called the FBI to cover your tracks. I will make you a pariah, a Judas. When I am done with you, you will not be able to show your face at a single-family reunion, wedding, or funeral. You will have no village. You will have no community. You will be completely, entirely erased from this family. The emotional toll of her words crashed over me like a suffocating wave. For 32 years, I had bent over backward trying to earn this woman's love. I had paid her bills when she was short on cash. I had bought her a new refrigerator when hers broke down. I had sent her flowers every Mother's Day, hoping that just once she would look at me with the same fierce, protective adoration she gave to Chloe. But looking at her now, watching the absolute hatred burning in her eyes, the truth finally crystallized in my mind. I never had a mother. I had a warden. And I was never a daughter to her. I was simply an asset. I was a bank account, a credit score, a tool to be used and discarded the moment I stopped serving her golden child. She did not care if I went to prison. She did not care if I lost my career. She was perfectly willing to feed me to the wolves if it meant keeping her favorite daughter wrapped in stolen luxury. A heavy, suffocating silence descended over the office. Darius stood off to the side, a smug, victorious grin plastered across his face. He knew he did not have to say another word. My mother had done his dirty work for him. She had taken a sledgehammer to my heart and completely leveled my emotional defenses. I looked down at the forged signature on the desk. The blue ink mocked me. They thought they had won. They thought the threat of being unloved and excommunicated would break me, because for my entire life it always had. They thought my fear of abandonment was stronger than my sense of self-preservation. I slowly closed my eyes, absorbing the profound, agonizing pain of the ultimate betrayal. Every childhood memory of her pushing me aside every holiday where I was treated like an afterthought. Every unfair criticism, it all pooled into a cold, hard knot in the center of my chest. When I opened my eyes again, the desperate daughter seeking her mother's approval was completely dead. All that remained was the vice president of operations. The ringing phone shattered the heavy silence in my office before I could utter a single word about the forged document sitting on my desk. The sound did not come from Darius's wrist or a sleek smartphone. He reached into the inner pocket of his tailored suit and pulled out a cheap plastic burner phone. The kind you buy at a gas station with cash. The hypocrisy was almost poetic. A man preaching about generational wealth and decentralized finance was communicating on a disposable device because the federal government had likely seized his real phone during the morning raid. He glanced at the glowing screen, his smug expression morphing into a look of urgent triumph. He looked at my mother, then at me. "It is her," he announced, his voice thick with self-importance. "It is your sister." Without asking for permission, he swiped the screen to answer, pressed the speakerphone button, and dropped the cheap plastic device directly onto my mahogany desk right next to the forged guarantor agreement. An automated voice filled the room, sterile and indifferent. "You have a prepaid collect call from an inmate at the Fulton County Jail. To accept this call, press 1. Darius pressed the button. The line clicked, followed immediately by the sound of chaotic background noise. Metal doors slamming, women shouting, and the distinct echo of a concrete holding area. And then cutting through the ambient misery of the jailhouse came the shrill, hysterical sobbing of my 29-year-old sister. "Darius, is it done?" Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking with sheer panic. "Are you at the bank? You need to get me out of here right now. I cannot breathe in here. It smells like bleach and sweat." A woman in the corner keeps looking at my shoes. "You need to tell the guards who I am." "Baby, I am here," Darius cooed, leaning over my desk toward the phone. "I am handling it. I am sitting in your sister's office right now. She is looking at the wire transfer instructions." My mother rushed forward, hovering over the phone as if she could physically reach through the speaker and hug her favorite child. "Chloe, sweetheart, Mommy is here too. We are going to get you out. Just hold on. Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "Mom, it is a nightmare," Chloe wailed, completely ignoring the severity of the federal charges against her. "They made me take off my jewelry. They took my engagement ring. Do you know how dirty these floors are? I am sitting on a metal bench and my silk blouse is ruined. And my hair. Mom, they would not let me bring my silk wrap. My tape and extensions are getting matted. You have to make Nia pay the money right this second. Tell her to hurry up. I have a nail appointment at 3 o'clock and I cannot miss it. I sat back in my leather chair staring at the plastic phone. It was utterly surreal. My sister was facing a decade in federal prison for defrauding the United States government, and her primary concern was her tape and extensions and a manicure. She did not ask if I was okay. She did not apologize for the fact that her husband had just tried to extort me using my stolen identity. She simply demanded my life savings as if I were a slow waiter who had forgotten her drink order. I leaned forward, my voice calm, level, and completely devoid of sympathy. "Chloe," I said clearly into the microphone, "I am not sending the money." The line went dead silent for 2 full seconds. The background noise of the jail seemed to fade away as my sister processed the fact that someone had finally told her no. When she spoke again, the crying had stopped. The frightened victim act vanished, replaced instantly by the vicious, entitled, spoiled brat she had always been. "Excuse me," Chloe snapped, her voice dropping an octave, turning hard and venomous. "What do you mean you are not sending the money? Darius said you have $120,000 just sitting there. You do not even need it. You are single. You have no life. Send the money to his lawyer so I can go home." "I need that money for the down payment on my house," I replied smoothly. "And even if I did not, I would not use it to bail out a woman who helped steal my identity. I am looking at a forged corporate guarantor form right now, Chloe. You and Darius tied my name to your fake company. You committed federal fraud." "Do not be so dramatic." "Nia," Chloe scoffed, the sound distorted through the cheap speaker. "Nobody stole your identity. We just leveraged family assets. That is what families do. They help each other build empires. But you have always been too stupid to understand business. You just want to play it safe. You are punishing me because Darius is a visionary, and you are just a glorified secretary. A glorified secretary who is currently not sitting in a concrete cell at the Fulton County Jail," I reminded her. "A secretary who did not buy a Hermes bag with stolen taxpayer money. The FBI knows exactly what you did, Chloe. They have the bank records. They have the wire transfers. Your visionary husband used government relief funds to buy VIP sections at nightclubs while you paraded around Buckhead pretending to be a wealthy socialite." I heard Chloe gasp sharply on the other end of the line. The truth hit her, but instead of taking accountability, she immediately launched into a frantic, unhinged defense mechanism. She realized she could not bully me, so she pivoted straight to gaslighting. "You told them," Chloe screamed, her voice echoing so loudly the burner phone vibrated against the desk. "You tipped off the IRS. You called the feds. I knew it. Darius, I told you she was jealous of us. She is the one who set us up." "I did not call anyone," I said coldly. "You set yourselves up when you filed fake tax forms for dead people." "Liar!" Chloe shrieked, fully committing to the delusion. "You have always hated me, Nia. Ever since we were little, you could never stand the fact that people liked me more. You could never stand the fact that Mom actually loved me because I am easy to love, and you are just a cold, miserable person. You ruined my sweet 16 party because you refused to buy me the dress I wanted. You ruined my wedding by complaining about the catering bill you had to pay. And now you are trying to ruin my marriage by sending my husband to federal prison." My mother nodded vigorously, glaring at me as if Chloe's absurd accusations were gospel truth. "Tell her, Chloe," she whispered aggressively. "Tell her how wicked she is." "You are sick." "Nia," Chloe continued, her voice gaining momentum as she fed off my mother's validation. "You saw me finally happy. You saw me living in a luxury high-rise. You saw me driving a nice car, and it killed you. It killed you that the little sister you always looked down on became more successful than you ever will be. So you dug into our private business. You found a technicality in Darius's paperwork and you reported us. You want me to be a convicted felon just so you can feel superior at the family Thanksgiving table." I listened to the absolute madness pouring out of the speaker. It was a masterclass in narcissistic projection. She had stolen a government loan. Her husband had stolen my social security number. They had blown hundreds of thousands of dollars on pure vanity. Yet in her twisted mind, she was the victim of my jealousy. She genuinely believed that her fraudulent lifestyle was a testament to her superiority and that my refusal to go bankrupt for her was an act of malicious sabotage. There is no technicality, Chloe, I said, my tone remaining dangerously even. You stole money from the government. The FBI caught you. And now you want me to hand over the money I worked 10 years to save so you can pay a lawyer to lie for you. It is not going to happen. You are a monster, Chloe sobbed, switching back to the hysterical crying tactic. She knew the clock on her collect call was ticking down. Mom, make her do it. Please. They are going to transfer me to the general population block. I cannot survive in there. The women in here are animals. They keep looking at my teeth. Mom, please do not let her do this to me. My mother slammed her hand on the desk, pointing at the laptop. You hear your sister? Open the computer, Nia. Do it right now or God will strike you down where you sit. I ignored my mother entirely, keeping my eyes locked on the burner phone. You are exactly where you belong, Chloe. You wanted the lifestyle of a mob wife. Now you get to experience the consequences. Chloe let out a blood-curdling scream of pure frustration. Fine, she yelled, her voice raw and jagged. You want to play hardball? You want to be the tough corporate boss? Listen to me very carefully, Nia. If you do not wire that $120,000 to the offshore account right this second, you are dead to me. She paused, breathing heavily into the receiver, making sure her final threat landed with maximum impact. I mean it. If I have to spend one more night in this filthy cell because you are too cheap and jealous to help your own flesh and blood, I will never speak to you again. I will delete your number. I will ban you from my life. When I have children, they will never know your name. You will lose your sister forever. You will be completely alone in this world. Choose right now, your money or your family. The automated voice cut in abruptly. You have 1 minute remaining on this call. Darius leaned over the desk, his eyes wide, his jaw set. You heard her, Nia. 1 minute. The clock is ticking. What is it going to be? I looked at the cheap plastic burner phone sitting on my mahogany desk. The automated voice was still echoing through the speaker, threatening to cut the line. I did not hesitate. I reached out, pressed my index finger against the bright red icon on the screen, and ended the call. The room plunged back into a suffocating, heavy silence. I choose myself, I said, looking directly into Darius' eyes. I choose my money. I choose my peace. And I am entirely comfortable losing a sister who thinks my sole purpose on this earth is to fund her delusions. When the call disconnected, something inside Darius fundamentally shifted. The charismatic, fast-talking entrepreneur routine vanished completely. The fake blinding smile faded into a tight, cruel line. His posture changed. He was no longer trying to charm or intimidate me with business buzzwords. He was looking at me with the cold, calculating eyes of a cornered predator. He reached into the inner breast pocket of his royal blue suit jacket. He did not pull out another phone. He pulled out a second folded legal document much thicker than the first. He gripped it tightly in his large hand and slammed it down onto the glass surface of my desk, right next to the forged corporate guarantor agreement we had just discussed. You think that guarantor agreement is just a piece of paper you can fight in court? Darius asked, his voice dropping into a sinister, mocking register. You think you can just hire some corporate lawyer, claim forgery, and walk away clean? You are underestimating me, Nia. I knew you would be difficult. I knew you would try to act superior. So I made sure there were absolutely no loopholes. I did not touch the document. I simply looked down at it. The bold heading across the top page read, General Power of Attorney. Let me explain exactly how this works. Darius continued pacing slowly in front of my desk, savoring every moment of his perceived victory. 8 months ago, when I was structuring Apex Global Solutions, I needed a massive capital injection. The Small Business Administration was handing out relief funds, but for the highest funding tier, the underwriting process was brutal. They required a corporate guarantor with a flawless financial history. My credit was tied up. Chloe had no income. But you You had an 800 credit score. You had zero debt. You had a six-figure corporate salary. You were the perfect financial host. He stopped pacing and leaned over the desk, tapping the power of attorney document with his index finger. But the banks are not stupid. They do not just take a signature on a loan application anymore. They require secondary verification. They require legal authorization. That is where your mother stepped in. I shifted my gaze to my mother. She stood perfectly still near the office door, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She looked completely unapologetic and defiant. Darius chuckled, a dark, evil sound that made my skin crawl. Brenda had all your old documents stored in her attic. Your original birth certificate, your old tax returns, your social security card, even your old utility bills from college. She handed them right over to me. We used those documents to establish a parallel identity for you. We opened a new email address in your name. We bought a burner phone to intercept the two-factor authentication texts from the bank. And then we drafted this power of attorney. It grants me complete legal authority to execute financial contracts on your behalf, he explained, his eyes shining with malicious pride. And before you ask, yes, it is legally binding. It was stamped and certified by a licensed notary public, a buddy of mine who owed me a favor and did not ask questions when I brought the paperwork to him. As far as the state of Georgia and the federal government are concerned, you legally appointed me to manage your investments. You gave me the keys to your financial life. The sheer audacity of the crime was paralyzing. He had not just forged a signature, he had orchestrated a comprehensive, premeditated theft of my identity. He had spent weeks building a trap, carefully laying the groundwork to ensure that if his fraudulent empire collapsed, I would be the one buried under the rubble. Do you understand the trap you are in? Darius asked softly, his face inches from mine. The federal loan I secured using your pristine credit profile was for $500,000. $500,000, Nia. Because you are the legally binding guarantor, the moment my company defaults, that debt becomes entirely yours. He stood up straight, adjusting his suit jacket, relishing the power he believed he held over me. If I go to federal prison, my assets will be seized, Apex Global Solutions will be dissolved, and the federal government will look for the guarantor to recoup their $500,000. They will not care about our family drama. They will only look at the certified documents. They will look at you. He began listing my assets, ticking them off on his fingers with agonizing precision. They will immediately freeze your bank accounts. That $120,000 you are hoarding for a house, seized. They will send a garnishment order directly to the payroll department of this logistics company. How embarrassing will it be when Human Resources finds out their vice president is a liability? They will place a lien on any property you ever try to buy. Your 800 credit score will drop to 500 overnight. Good luck keeping your executive title when your company runs their annual background check and sees you are defaulting on a $500,000 federal fraud loan. Your corporate career will be completely destroyed. I sat in my leather chair processing the intricate, devastating web they had woven around me. They had weaponized my success. Every late night at the office, every bonus I had carefully saved, every sacrifice I had made to build a secure, independent life, had been hijacked by the very people who mocked me for working hard. I turned my head and looked directly at my mother. You helped him do this, I stated. It was not a question. My mother did not flinch. She stepped forward, her chin raised high, completely devoid of any maternal guilt. She looked at me not as a daughter, but as a resource she had rightfully claimed. Family shares everything, Nia, she said firmly, her voice steady and righteous. What is the point of having an 800 credit score if you are not going to use it to uplift your family? You are just sitting on all that privilege. You do not have a husband. You do not have children to provide for. Darius is building a legacy. He needed a stepping stone, and God provided you as that stepping stone. You committed a felony, Mom, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You gave a con artist my social security number so he could steal $500,000 in my name. Do not use those ugly words with me, she snapped, waving her hand dismissively. I am your mother. I gave you life. I fed you. I put clothes on your back. You owe me. You owe this family. We did not steal anything. We utilized an asset. In the Bible, God punishes the servant who buries his talents in the dirt instead of multiplying them. Your credit score was a talent, Nia, and you were burying it. If you had just been a supportive sister from the start, we would not have had to go behind your back. You forced us to do this because you are stingy and unnatural. The psychological gymnastics were staggering. She had facilitated the potential destruction of my entire future, and she was framing it as an act of family unity that I had stubbornly provoked. She genuinely believed she was entitled to my identity simply because she had given birth to me. Darius stepped back in, bringing the focus back to his extortion. So here's the deal, Nia. The FBI is building a case, but right now I am out on bail. I have an appointment this afternoon with one of the most ruthless, high-powered federal defense attorneys in Atlanta. A man who specializes in making white-collar charges disappear. But his retainer is exactly $120,000. He tapped his knuckle against the glass desk. You have two options. Option 1, you log into your banking portal right now. You wire the $120,000 to the offshore account I provided. I hire my lawyer. The lawyer ties the federal case up in court for years. The loan does not officially default, and your precious credit score and corporate job remain perfectly safe. We all walk away clean. He leaned closer, his eyes narrowing into cold black slits. Option 2. You refuse. You hold on to your little house fund. I cannot afford the lawyer. I go back to the holding cell and I take a plea deal. I plead guilty. Apex Global Solutions goes bankrupt tomorrow, and the federal government immediately initiates debt collection against the guarantor. You. I will sit in a minimum security camp for a couple of years, but you will spend the next decade of your life paying off $500,000. You will lose your savings, your job, your reputation, and your entire future. He smiled, a wicked, triumphant expression that made my stomach churn. So tell me, Madam Vice President, how much is your pristine life really worth to you? Pay my legal retainer or I will destroy everything you have ever built. Because if you will not do it for family loyalty, you will do it for your own survival. I let out a sharp, ragged gasp. I stumbled backward, allowing my knees to buckle just slightly enough to force me to catch my balance against the edge of the mahogany conference table. I raised trembling hands to my face, burying my eyes in my palms. I forced my shoulders to shake violently. I let out a low, pathetic sob that sounded exactly like a woman whose entire world had just collapsed. I played the part perfectly. The confident vice president of operations vanished, replaced by a terrified, broken corporate employee staring down the barrel of absolute financial ruin. Darius let out a loud, booming laugh. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated victory that bounced off the glass walls of my office. He clapped his massive hands together, the sharp smack signaling his triumph. He had broken me. He had won, or so he thought. My mother sighed, a heavy, dramatic exhale of righteous relief. She walked over to where I stood, hunched over the table. Her footsteps were light and victorious. She placed a heavy, warm hand on my shoulder, patting my back with a sickeningly sweet condescension. "See, Nia," she murmured, her voice dripping with fake maternal warmth. "Was that so hard? God always makes a way. He always softens the hardest of hearts. I knew you would not let the devil use your pride to destroy your own blood. You are finally doing the right thing for your family." I kept my face hidden behind my hands, taking deep, slow breaths. I was not crying. Beneath my trembling fingers, my eyes were bone dry and completely cold. I was simply buying time. I was setting the stage. Darius stepped up to my desk, acting as if he already owned the place. He pulled the crumpled slip of paper with the offshore routing numbers from his pocket, again flattening it out on the glass surface with the palm of his hand. "As soon as this wire clears, I am calling the attorney," Darius announced to my mother, completely ignoring my supposed emotional breakdown. "He said he can have the emergency motion filed by 3 o'clock. Chloe will be home in time for dinner." My mother clapped her hands together in delight. "Oh, praise Jesus. I need to call the restaurant right now. We should have a massive welcome home dinner for her. That poor girl has been through so much trauma today, sitting in that awful place. She is going to need a good meal and a glass of champagne to calm her nerves. Darius nodded, leaning against my desk with a relaxed, arrogant posture. Tell her to book the private dining room at Chop's Lobster Bar. Put it on the new corporate card I gave you. I will handle all the federal logistics once my lawyer sweeps this little misunderstanding under the rug. After that, we are looking at a clean slate. I have a new venture lined up in the decentralized crypto space. I just needed this temporary capital to bridge the gap. They were already spending my money. They were planning celebratory dinners and discussing new fraudulent business ventures while I was supposedly losing my entire life savings to keep them out of federal prison. The sheer sociopathy of their conversation was mind-boggling. I let my hands drop to my sides, keeping my head bowed. I dragged my feet as I slowly walked around the large mahogany desk. Every step I took was carefully calculated to look heavy, defeated, and reluctant. Darius watched me like a hawk, his eyes tracking my every movement. "Go on," he ordered, pointing a thick finger at the closed laptop sitting on my desk. "Open it up. Let us get this over with so I can get back to building my empire." I reached out and placed my fingertips on the cool aluminum lid of my laptop. I hesitated, letting my hand tremble just enough for them to notice. "Do not stall, Nia," my mother warned, her voice losing its fake warmth and returning to a sharp, commanding bark. "You saw the paperwork. You know what happens if you try to be stubborn. Just type in the numbers and hit send. It is just money. You can always make more money. You cannot make another sister." I slowly lifted the laptop lid. The massive 32-inch curved monitor flared to life, casting a bright, sterile white glow across my face. I stared at the login screen. My company logo sat perfectly centered above the password prompt. I reached out and placed my hands on the keyboard. Darius immediately abandoned his relaxed posture. He moved around the desk and stepped right up behind me. He stood so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body and smell the overpowering stench of his cheap cologne mixed with nervous sweat. He was hovering over my shoulder, desperate to watch my screen and ensure I did not try any sudden tricks. "Log into your personal banking portal," Darius instructed, his voice low and demanding. "Open the wire transfer tab. I will read the numbers to you." I typed in my master password. The keystrokes were agonizingly slow. Click, click, click. I made a deliberate show of making a mistake, hitting the backspace key 3 times, letting out a frustrated, shaky sigh. "Come on," Darius snapped, tapping his foot impatiently against the carpet. "It is not rocket science. Just type the password." "I am trying," I whispered, my voice sounding weak and defeated. "My hands are shaking." My mother scoffed loudly from the other side of the room. "Oh, for heaven's sake, stop acting like a martyr, Nia. You are transferring funds from one account to another. You do it every single day for this logistics company. Just pretend you are doing it for your white bosses. Maybe then you will type a little faster." I hit the enter key. The screen transitioned from the lock screen to my secure desktop. I moved the mouse cursor, gliding it slowly across the screen toward the web browser icon. The tension in the room was palpable, thick and suffocating. They were practically holding their breath, their eyes glued to the bright monitor, waiting for the moment they would finally steal my freedom. I double-clicked the browser icon. The window opened. I slowly typed the web address for my national bank into the URL bar. The home page loaded, displaying the smiling faces of stock photo actors, pretending to enjoy financial freedom. A cruel irony, considering what was happening in this office. Click the login button at the top right. Darius commanded, his finger pointing at my screen, almost touching the glass. I clicked the button. The login portal appeared. "Username," he demanded. I slowly typed in my banking username. Every letter felt like a heavy weight dropping into the silent room. "Password," he pushed, his breathing growing heavier. I typed in the long, complex string of characters that secured my life savings. I hit enter. A security prompt popped up on the screen. Two-factor authentication required, the screen read. "A 6-digit code has been sent to your registered mobile device." Darius groaned in frustration. "Where is your phone?" "Get your phone." I reached into the pocket of my blazer and pulled out my smartphone. I tapped the screen to wake it up. The notification for the text message was right there. I opened it. 6 numbers. Read them out loud, Darius ordered. 7, 4, 2, 9, 1, 8, I said slowly. I typed the numbers into the authentication box on the screen. Hit submit, my mother yelled from across the room, unable to contain her anxious excitement. Just hit the button, Nia. I moved the cursor over the submit button. I hovered there for a long, agonizing moment. I let my hand shake one final time. I took a deep, shuddering breath, playing the role of the defeated victim right up to the very last second. Are you going to hit the button? Or do I have to push your finger down myself? Darius growled, leaning his heavy frame against the back of my leather chair. I clicked submit. The screen loaded. The banking dashboard appeared in high definition. Right in the center of the screen in bold black numbers was my total available balance. $120,452. Darius let out a low whistle. Look at that. Beautiful. Now go to the Transfer tab. Select Wire Transfer. International. I moved the mouse exactly as he instructed. I clicked on the Wire Transfer option. I selected the International Destination toggle. Okay, Darius said, grabbing the slip of paper from the desk and holding it up so he could read it clearly. Here is the routing number. You need to type this exactly as I say it. One mistake and the funds get bounced back. Are you ready? I placed my fingers over the number pad on the keyboard. I am ready, I whispered. He began to dictate the numbers. 0, 4, 7, 9. I typed the numbers. 2, 2, 8, 1. I typed the numbers. My mother walked over and stood next to Darius, both of them staring greedily at the screen. We are going to be just fine, she whispered to him. We are going to get Chloe out and we are going to fix everything. 5, 6, 0. Darius finished the routing number, now the account number. He read off a long string of digits. I typed them all in, matching his pace perfectly. Amount, he said, his voice trembling slightly with pure adrenaline. Type in 120,000. Leave the 400 in there for yourself. Call it a convenience fee. I moved my cursor to the amount box. I typed 120000. The screen displayed the final confirmation page. It showed my account, the offshore destination account, and the massive sum of money about to be moved across international borders. At the very bottom of the page was a bright blue button that read, Confirm and Send. Do it. Darius whispered, his face hovering right next to my ear. Send the money, Naya. Buy your life back. I placed my hand firmly on the mouse. I moved the cursor until it rested perfectly over the blue confirm button. I stopped acting. I stopped shaking. My posture straightened completely. The terrified employee vanished. I looked at the screen and then I slowly turned my head to look Darius right in the eye. The frantic, terrified energy I had been projecting just seconds ago completely vanished. I let my hand move away from the mouse, resting it casually on the edge of the keyboard. I leaned back into my leather chair, crossing my legs. I did not blink. I just stared at him with an expression of absolute freezing calm. Darius frowned, his thick brows pulling together in confusion. The triumphant smirk on his face faltered for a fraction of a second. "What are you doing?" he barked, tapping the glass desk with his knuckles. "The button is right there. Click confirm. We do not have time for you to zone out." I ignored him entirely. I shifted my gaze past his bulky frame and locked eyes with my mother. She was still standing near the edge of the desk, her hands clasped together in eager anticipation. "Mom," I said, my voice smooth and conversational, completely devoid of the panic from moments ago. "Do you remember what happened the summer before I left for Howard University? I was 18 years old. I'd just gotten my first real job working the cash register at a grocery store. I wanted to open a student checking account to deposit my minimum wage paychecks." My mother blinked, clearly thrown off by the sudden pivot in conversation. "What? Why are you talking about college right now? Just send the wire, Nia. You are being ridiculous." "Answer the question," I commanded, injecting a sharp edge of authority into my tone that made her physically recoil. Do you remember what the bank teller told me when they ran my social security number? She looked away suddenly, finding the city skyline outside my window very interesting. I do not have time for a trip down memory lane. I will remind you then. I continued, my voice steady and echoing clearly in the quiet office. The teller looked at me with pity. She told me I could not open a standard checking account because my credit score was already ruined. She printed out a report showing 3 different utility bills, a cable account, and 2 massive unpaid credit cards, all in my name. They had all gone to collections. Thousands of dollars in debt attached to an 18-year-old girl who had never even owned a credit card. Darius groaned loudly, slamming his hand against the back of my chair. Nobody cares about your college sob story. Hit the button. I kept my eyes pinned on my mother. I went home that day crying, I told her. I confronted you in the kitchen. And do you remember what you said to me? You did not apologize. You did not even look ashamed. You told me your credit was bad and you needed the electricity kept on, so you used my social security number. You said it was the least I could do for the woman who gave me life. You told me it was my rent for living in your house. You were living under my roof, my mother snapped, her defensiveness flaring up exactly as I knew it would. You were eating my food. You think electricity is free. I kept the lights on for you. Exactly, I replied, nodding slowly. You justified stealing my financial future because you felt entitled to my existence. You taught me a very valuable lesson that day, Mom. You taught me that you view my identity as your personal property. And you taught me that I could never ever trust you with my personal data again. So I took precautions. I explained, steepling my fingers together and resting them on my lap. I spent the next 4 years aggressively paying off the debt you accumulated. I rebuilt my credit from the ground up, and the moment I secured my first corporate job, I paid a premium to subscribe to the highest tier of advanced identity monitoring available. I placed a permanent fraud alert on my social security number. I set up real-time biometric alerts for any credit inquiries, any public record changes, and any legal documents filed under my name across all 50 states. Darius shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the laptop screen and back to my face. What does that have to do with anything? The power of attorney is already filed. It is done. You cannot undo it now. That is where you are wrong, Darius, I said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my face. I am not the naive 18-year-old girl crying in the kitchen anymore. I am an executive who manages multi-million-dollar corporate accounts. Do you honestly think a 2-bit scammer with a fake gold watch could steal my identity without me knowing? His jaw clenched. What are you talking about? I knew about the power of attorney the exact week you forged it. I stated clearly, my words hitting the room like physical blows. 8 months ago. It was a Tuesday. You took the forged document to a corrupt notary public in a strip mall in Decatur. You paid him $500 in cash to stamp it without me being present. Then you took that stamped document to the commercial lending branch of a mid-sized regional bank to apply for your fraudulent government loan. Darius took a step back, his eyes widening in genuine shock. His confident facade was completely cracking. How do you know that? Because the moment that notary logged that document into the state registry, my monitoring service flagged it. I explained thoroughly, enjoying the sheer panic blooming on his face. And the moment you submitted my name as a corporate guarantor, the regional bank ran a hard credit pull. My phone buzzed before you even walked out of the bank lobby. Furthermore, because I'm a vice president, my company requires annual financial disclosures to ensure executives are not burdened with undisclosed debt that could compromise our operational integrity. Our internal corporate audit team flagged the $500,000 loan application tied to my name almost immediately. My mother stared at me, her mouth hanging slightly open. You knew this whole time. Of course I knew, I replied, letting out a soft, mocking laugh. Did you think I was just blindly walking through life while you two plotted to ruin me? I saw the alerts. I pulled the public records. I saw the fake company you registered. I saw every single piece of the trap you were trying to set. Do you know how sloppy you are, Darius? I asked, leaning forward, resting my elbows on the desk. You think you are a mastermind? because you watched a few videos on real estate syndication. But you leave a digital footprint a mile wide. When you applied for that loan, you did not even use a secure virtual private network. You used the Internet Protocol address, registered to my mother's home router. The same router I bought for her. The same router I have administrative access to. I watched the data packets being sent to the Small Business Administration in real time. Darius swallowed hard, his chest heaving. You are bluffing. You cannot track that. I oversee international logistics, I reminded him. I track shipping containers across the Pacific Ocean using satellite telemetry. You think I cannot track a basic web form submitted from a residential address in the suburbs? I saw exactly what you uploaded. You forged my signature using a digital document editor, and you forgot to strip the metadata. The document properties still showed your registered email address as the author. It was amateur hour. Then why did you not say anything? Darius demanded, his voice rising thick with confusion and rising terror. If you knew I was forging your signature 8 months ago, why did you not call the police? Why did you not block the loan? Why did you let me get the $500,000? He was sweating profusely now. He was a man who suddenly realized he was not the hunter. He had been the prey all along. My mother stepped forward, pointing a trembling finger at me. You let me sit at Thanksgiving dinner and pray over his new business, she said, her voice shaking with a mix of fury and embarrassment. You let Chloe brag about her new car, knowing the whole time how it was paid for. You sat back and watched your own brother-in-law build a business on your name, and you did not say a single word. You are evil, Nia. You are truly evil. You just wanted to watch us fail. Yes, I did. I agreed without a single ounce of remorse. I watched you both feast on stolen money. I watched Chloe parade around with designer bags she did not earn. And I listened to you tell the entire extended family how much better Darius was than me, knowing that every single dime he had was stolen using my name. It was quite the performance. I wanted to watch you commit to the crime, Mom. I continued, my tone dropping to an icy, unforgiving whisper. Because if I had stopped you 8 months ago, what would have happened? You would have cried. You would have played the victim. You would have told the family that I overreacted to a simple misunderstanding. Darius would have claimed he was just trying to run a background check and made a clerical error. You both would have slithered away, only to try and steal from me again the next time you needed cash. I needed you to cross the line. I needed you to commit a federal felony so profound, so undeniable, that neither of you could ever manipulate your way out of it. Darius slammed both of his hands onto the desk, leaning over me, his face twisted in desperate rage. Shut up, he roared, his spit flying onto the glass. I do not care what you knew. I do not care what your little corporate audit team flagged. I have the signed power of attorney. If I go down, you go down. The government will take your money regardless of whether you knew about it or not. The trap is still closed. He pointed a shaking finger at the laptop screen. The blue confirm button was still waiting there, illuminated against the white background. Stop stalling, Nia. Stop playing these little psychological games. The wire transfer is set up. The routing number is entered. You are going to click confirm, or I am walking out of this office right now and I am letting the company default. You think you are so smart, but you still have to pay my lawyer to protect your own assets. Click the button. Click it right now. I did not move my hand toward the mouse. I simply looked at him, completely unbothered by his screaming. I am not playing psychological games, Darius. I am just explaining exactly how outclassed you are. Hit the button, my mother shrieked, her voice reaching a hysterical pitch. Hit it right now. I reached out. I placed my hand over the mouse. But I still did not click. I let them dangle there, hanging on the precipice of their own destruction, completely unaware of the massive unseen force about to crush them. I wanted them to remember this exact moment for the rest of their miserable lives. Darius shoved his hand toward the keyboard, his patience entirely depleted. Do it! He barked, his voice cracking with a mixture of greed and desperation. I did not let him touch the mouse. I pressed my index finger down. A sharp click echoed in the silent office. The blue confirm button depressed on the screen. The loading wheel spun for exactly 2 seconds. Then the banking interface completely vanished. There was no green check mark. There was no friendly confirmation message thanking me for my transaction. Instead, the massive 32-inch curved monitor flashed a blinding violet red. A harsh, high-pitched electronic alarm beeped once from the computer speakers, piercing the quiet air of the executive suite. A bold white banner appeared across the center of the bright red screen. It read in heavy capital letters, "Alert! Secure federal honeypot account accessed. IP address logged. Unauthorized wire transfer intercepted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Darius jerked back as if the monitor had physically burned him. "What is that?" he stammered, his eyes darting frantically across the screen, his brain refusing to process the words. "What did you do?" "You typed the wrong routing number. You triggered a fraud alert." My mother let out a sharp gasp, covering her mouth with both hands. "Nia, what is happening? Fix it. Fix it right now." I calmly moved my hand away from the mouse. I pushed my leather chair back and slowly stood up. I smoothed the wrinkles from my tailored blazer, rising to my full height. I was no longer playing the victim. I was the executioner. "You are right, Mom," I said, my voice ringing out with absolute undeniable authority. "That $120,000 is not mine. It is a federal honeypot account. And you both just authorized a wire transfer to a known money laundering offshore account from a monitored IP address." Darius stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. He looked back at the screen, then back at me. No, that is impossible. That was your savings account." I walked around the edge of my mahogany desk, closing the physical distance between myself and the two people who had tried to destroy me. "Let me explain exactly how a real corporate executive operates, Darius," I said, staring directly into his terrified eyes. 6 months ago, the internal audit division of this logistics company conducted a routine executive background sweep. When you are a vice president handling $50 million quarterly budgets, the company demands absolute financial transparency. They found the $500,000 commercial loan originating from Apex Global Solutions attached to my Social Security number. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Do you have any idea what that did to my professional life? I was pulled out of a board meeting. I was escorted by security to the legal department. I had to surrender my company electronics and sit through 48 hours of grueling interrogation by our corporate attorneys. My job, my reputation, everything I had bled for over the last decade was hanging by a thread because you and my mother decided my credit score was your personal piggy bank. My mother's knees began to tremble. She reached out and grabbed the back of a guest chair to steady herself. "You did not tell me," she whispered. "Of course I did not tell you," I replied sharply, because the moment I realized my own mother and brother-in-law had forged my signature to steal $500,000 of taxpayer money, I did exactly what a responsible corporate officer does. I contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Darius shook his head wildly, stumbling backward until his back hit the glass wall of my office. "No, you are lying. You would not do that. You would not send your own family to prison." "I already did," I replied coldly. "But white-collar federal cases are incredibly complex, Darius. The FBI agent assigned to my case explained that proving you forged the signature was only half the battle. You could have easily claimed it was a clerical error. You could have blamed it all on my mother, saying she gave you the documents and you assumed she had my legal permission. You could have hired that fancy lawyer you keep bragging about and dragged the case out for years in civil court. The feds did not just want to prove you took the loan. They wanted to prove you were running an active criminal enterprise. They needed to catch you attempting to launder the stolen funds. So we laid a trap." I continued, my words flowing with rhythmic, devastating precision. "The FBI temporarily unfroze a portion of your domestic accounts this morning to give you a false sense of security. They allowed you to post bail. They knew that once you were out, your first priority would be securing cash to pay for your criminal defense and to get Chloe out of holding. And they knew because I told them that you were arrogant enough to come straight to my office to intimidate me." Darius looked like he was going to be physically sick. He looked down at the red screen, the federal warning banner reflecting in his dark eyes. "That bank account you just forced me to log into," I pointed at the laptop. It does not belong to me. My actual savings are secured in an entirely different institution. That account was a secure, monitored environment set up by the Treasury Department. The $120,000 was bait. We knew you had an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. We just needed you to explicitly provide the routing number and attempt to move the money. I took a step closer to him, forcing him to look at me. By physically standing in my office dictating those numbers to me and threatening me to hit send, you did not just commit wire fraud. You committed federal extortion and international money laundering. My mother let out a loud, wailing sob. She abandoned her pride completely, her legs giving out as she collapsed onto the expensive carpet of my office. You set us up, she cried, tears of genuine terror finally spilling down her cheeks. Your own mother, your own sister. You planned this whole thing to destroy us. I did not destroy you. I corrected her, entirely devoid of sympathy. You destroyed yourselves the moment you decided my identity was yours to sell. You thought my boundaries were just words. You thought you could guilt-trip me, threaten my career, and weaponize my love for this family. But I stopped loving you the moment I saw that forged signature. Darius suddenly pushed off the glass wall. A desperate, frantic energy possessed him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the cheap plastic burner phone. He frantically tapped the screen, trying to dial his lawyer or whoever was managing his offshore accounts. You can put that away, I told him, watching his thumbs fly across the useless screen. My office is located in the center of the building. We use a localized cellular signal jammer during high-level investor meetings to prevent corporate espionage. Your burner phone has not had a signal since you walked through that door. Darius stared at his phone. The screen displayed no service. He let out a roar of frustration and threw the device violently against the wall, shattering the cheap plastic into dozens of pieces. You think this makes you safe? He yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me, spit flying from his lips. You think the feds care about you? You are just a pawn to them. I will tell them you forced me to do this. I will tell them it was entrapment. I will tell them you were the mastermind behind the whole thing. It is your word against mine, Nia. Entrapment. I laughed out loud, a harsh, echoing sound that filled the room. Entrapment implies I coerced you into committing a crime you otherwise would not commit. I did not force you to break into my secure corporate building. I did not force you to bring a forged power of attorney to my desk. I did not force you to call your wife in a holding cell to use her as emotional leverage. You walked in here entirely on your own free will, overflowing with arrogance, completely convinced that you were the smartest person in the room. And as for it being my word against yours, I added, my smile fading into a look of absolute steel. I was not stalling earlier because I was afraid of you, Darius. I was stalling to ensure the audio recording was crystal clear. Darius froze. His eyes darted around the ceiling of my office, desperately searching for a hidden camera or microphone. What audio recording? He demanded, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. I reached over to my desk phone, the one my mother had aggressively slammed her purse over earlier. I pointed to a small button on the console. A tiny red light had been glowing steadily this entire time. My office phone is directly connected to the corporate security mainframe, I explained calmly. When you walked into this building, I activated a direct unencrypted line to the FBI field office in downtown Atlanta. They have been listening to every single word spoken in this room for the last 45 minutes. The color drained entirely from my mother's face. She let out a soft whimpering sound, rocking back and forth on her knees. They heard you confess to mortgaging Grandma House, Mom, I said, turning my cold gaze to her. They heard you admit to giving Darius my social security card and birth certificate. They heard you justify felony identity theft. And Darius, they heard you dictate the exact Cayman Islands routing number. They heard you threaten to ruin my credit score and my corporate career if I did not pay your legal retainer. You handed them a fully wrapped, perfectly articulated confession to federal extortion. Do you know how hard it was to sit here and listen to you belittle me? I asked, pacing slowly behind my desk. Do you know how much restraint it took not to throw you out the moment you walked in here wearing clothes bought with my stolen credit? The FBI agents warned me. They told me you would be cruel. They told me my mother would try to manipulate my emotions. They prepped me for the psychological warfare. They told me to play along, to act defeated, to cry if I had to, just to get you to open your mouth and seal your own fate. And you both fell for it perfectly. Darius looked frantically toward the heavy glass door of my office. His flight response finally kicked into overdrive. He lunged for the door handle, grabbing the thick chrome bar and yanking it with all his strength. It did not budge. "Where are you going?" I asked, crossing my arms. "You cannot leave Darius." The magnetic electronic lock on that door engages automatically during a security breach. You are trapped in the white man glass box you were just making fun of. He slammed his shoulder against the heavy tempered glass. It rattled loudly, but it did not give way. He beat his fists against the door, his tailored blue suit wrinkling, his fake gold watch scratching against the glass. He was completely locked in. He had nothing left. His fake wealth was gone. His leverage was gone. His freedom was ticking away by the second. "You wanted to know how much my pristine life was worth to me," I asked him, throwing his own threat right back in his face as he slumped against the locked door. "It is worth everything, and I was never going to let a pathetic fake entrepreneur take it away from me." The realization that he had been completely outplayed by the woman he had constantly belittled finally snapped whatever thin restraint Darius had left. His expression morphed from terrified realization into blinding, animalistic rage. The sheer humiliation of falling into my trap destroyed his carefully crafted facade. He let out a guttural, furious roar and lunges directly at me. He threw his massive, heavy frame across the room, his hands outstretched like claws aiming right for my throat. But I was expecting it. The federal agents had warned me about the predictable violent escalation of narcissistic rage. I smoothly and quickly sidestepped to my right, sliding effortlessly behind the protective barrier of my heavy mahogany desk. Darius's forward momentum carried him recklessly forward, and he crashed violently into my leather executive chair, sending it skidding across the polished floor until it smashed loudly into the wooden bookshelf. Realizing he could not easily reach me, panic completely overrode his anger. He scrambled awkwardly to his feet, his expensive royal blue suit jacket now torn at the shoulder seam, and made a mad, desperate dash for the exit. He slammed his entire body weight against the heavy tempered glass door, clawing frantically at the sleek chrome handle. He pulled, pushed, and threw his shoulder against the reinforced glass with the desperate energy of a trapped animal. "Open it!" he screamed, his voice cracking in absolute terror, his breath fogging up the glass. "Open the door right now! Let me out of here!" I stood perfectly still behind my desk, watching him thrash like a rat caught in an inescapable maze. "I do not have the override code, Darius," I replied evenly, my voice cutting through his panicked shouts. Just as Darius reared back, lifting his heavy loafer to physically kick the glass, the electronic lock beeped a sharp, high-pitched confirmation tone. The magnetic seal instantly disengaged. Before Darius could even process that the door was finally unlocked, it violently swung inward, striking him directly in the shoulder and sending him stumbling backward into the center of the office. 4 plainclothes FBI agents flooded into the executive suite. They moved with terrifying practiced and overwhelming efficiency. They wore dark tactical vests tightly strapped over their civilian clothes, their golden federal badges prominently displayed on thick silver chains bouncing against their chests. "FBI, get down on the ground," the lead agent bellowed. His voice was a weapon in itself, commanding absolute and completely drowning out my mother's sudden, hysterical shrieks. Darius tried to recover his balance, his eyes wide, darting wildly around the room. Instead of complying with the federal order, his fight-or-flight instinct completely betrayed him. He raised his hands, curling them into clumsy fists, and took a wild, desperate swinging punch at the closest agent stepping toward him. It was the absolute worst mistake he could possibly make. The trained agent easily deflected the sloppy punch, grabbed Darius tightly by the wrist, and twisted his arm violently and sharply behind his back. Darius let out a loud, high-pitched yell of sudden pain. 2 other agents swarmed him instantly, closing the distance in a fraction of a second. They grabbed his broad shoulders and drove him forcefully forward, using his own momentum against him. They slammed his face and chest squarely against the floor-to-ceiling glass wall of my office. The heavy impact made a sickening hollow thud. The entire glass panel vibrated violently under his weight. "Stop resisting," an agent commanded, firmly pressing his heavy forearm hard against the back of Darius's thick neck, pinning his face securely against the cool, transparent glass. Darius groaned loudly in defeat, his cheek smeared awkwardly against the glass wall, offering the entire 40-floor corporate bullpen a perfect front-row seat to his ultimate humiliating downfall. The sharp, metallic click of heavy steel handcuffs ratcheting tightly around his wrists echoed crisply through the tense room. My mother, who had been kneeling on the carpet in a state of paralyzing shock, suddenly snapped into an absolute frenzy. Seeing her beloved golden son-in-law forcefully pinned against the glass sent her into a completely unhinged, violent state of denial. "Get your hands off him!" she shrieked at the top of her lungs, scrambling clumsily to her feet. "In the mighty name of Jesus, leave my son alone." She grabbed her oversized, heavy leather purse by the straps and swung it wildly like a makeshift wrecking ball, aiming directly at the back of the head of the agent currently holding Darius down. The heavy bag struck the agent squarely in the shoulder blade. "Ma'am, step back immediately," the fourth agent commanded sternly, stepping directly into her path and raising his hands in a firm defensive posture to block her advance. She did not listen. She was fully immersed in her delusional righteous anger, entirely convinced that she was fighting a holy war against the government. "You are wicked demons," she wailed wildly, flailing her arms, trying desperately to scratch the agent's face with her manicured nails. "He is a good Christian businessman. You are tearing a righteous family apart." The agent did not hesitate or entertain her religious theatrics for a single second. With swift, clinical, and undeniable precision, he grabbed her flailing right arm, spun her body around forcefully, and pinned both of her hands tightly behind her back. My mother let out a dramatic, piercing scream, immediately falling to her knees and trying to turn her body into dead weight to avoid the physical arrest. "Oh, Lord, save me from this persecution," she cried out, staring up at the acoustic ceiling tiles. "Brenda, you are under arrest for accessory to federal wire fraud, federal extortion, and felony identity theft," the agent stated calmly, his voice completely unfazed by her loud, chaotic struggling. He secured the cold steel cuffs tightly around her wrists, locking them firmly into place. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I highly suggest you start using that right immediately." The chaotic kinetic energy in the room rapidly drained away, leaving only the heavy, ragged panting of the arrested criminals and the calm, controlled breathing of the federal agents. Darius was pulled roughly away from the glass, his face bruised and his fake gold watch dangling awkwardly near the steel cuffs. My mother was sobbing uncontrollably on the floor, her floral Sunday dress entirely wrinkled and ruined. The lead agent, a tall, imposing man with graying hair named Special Agent Reynolds, stepped carefully over my mother's discarded leather purse and walked directly toward my desk. He adjusted the straps of his tactical vest and offered me a brief, highly professional nod of acknowledgement. "Are you injured, Nia? Did he manage to make physical contact with you?" he asked, his tone entirely businesslike, but carrying a distinct trace of genuine professional respect for how I had handled the situation. "I am perfectly fine, Agent Reynolds," I replied, smoothing the front of my blazer and picking up my expensive fountain pen from the desk. I maintained my distance. He glanced over at the bright red honeypot warning banner still glaring brightly on my 32-inch curved monitor. The digital trap worked flawlessly, he confirmed, pulling a small black spiral notepad from his vest pocket. The Cybercrimes Division intercepted the wire transfer authorization the exact millisecond you clicked the confirm button. We successfully captured the entire digital footprint, the offshore Cayman Islands routing numbers, and the precise IP address match. It is a completely closed, airtight loop. He cannot claim he was merely inquiring about funds. He actively attempted to move stolen capital out of federal jurisdiction. "And the audio surveillance?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly steady and professional, entirely refusing to look down at my mother, who was currently weeping pathetically on the floor. I need to know if the recording holds up to legal scrutiny. Crystal clear, Agent Reynolds said, offering a tight, satisfied smile. The direct connection through your corporate security mainframe was absolutely pristine. We heard the entire unedited extortion attempt unfold in real time. We heard him explicitly threaten to destroy your credit score and intentionally sabotage your corporate standing if you refuse to pay his legal retainer. We heard him detail the offshore account mechanics. And importantly, we heard your mother proudly and voluntarily admit to supplying your original birth certificate and social security card to facilitate the initial loan fraud. They handed the United States Justice Department a textbook conspiracy charge wrapped with a neat little bow. I nodded slowly, feeling a massive invisible weight finally lift completely off my shoulders. Will the forged power of attorney be nullified immediately? I cannot afford to have my name attached to his defaulting shell company for another 24 hours. Agent Reynolds nodded affirmatively. The United States Attorney is already drafting the emergency injunction as we speak. By the time they process him downstairs at the federal courthouse, that forged document will be legally voided by a federal judge. Your credit score, your personal savings, and your professional standing at this logistics firm are completely and permanently insulated from his fallout. You did exactly what we asked you to do. You kept him talking, and you let him dig his own grave. Darius, hearing this entire exchange while being held by the other agents, twisted his head around, glaring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You set me up!" He spat, his voice raspy and desperate. "You wore a wire." "I did not need to wear a wire, Darius," I replied coldly, looking down at him with absolute disdain. "You walked directly into a corporate fortress and shouted your federal crimes into a live security speakerphone." Agent Reynolds signaled to his tactical team, "Get them out of my sight. The transport vans are waiting in the underground loading dock." Two agents firmly grabbed Darius by the biceps, hauling him upright. The tailored royal blue suit that he had strutted into my office wearing was now twisted and ruined, a large tear ripping through the shoulder seam. The fake gold watch he had flashed so arrogantly dangled loosely against the heavy steel handcuffs binding his wrists. He did not fight back anymore. All the fight, all the arrogant tech bro jargon, all the condescending lectures about high-level finance had been completely beaten out of him. He hung his head low, his chin touching his chest entirely, unable to make eye contact with anyone in the room. Another agent hoisted my mother to her feet. She was dead weight, her legs trembling so violently she could barely stand. The bright floral Sunday dress she had worn like a badge of righteous authority was severely wrinkled, and her expensive church hat had been knocked completely askew. Her face was a tragic canvas of smeared mascara and running tears. She let out low, pathetic whimpering sounds, completely stripped of the booming, authoritative voice she had used to terrorize me just moments ago. "Move out," Agent Reynolds commanded, gesturing toward the shattered tranquility of my office doorway. The heavy glass door swung wide open and the procession began. I stepped out from behind my mahogany desk, smoothing the front of my tailored blazer, and followed them out into the main corridor. The 40-floor executive bullpen, which was normally a hive of ringing phones, hushed negotiations and rapid keyboard clicking had fallen into an absolute deathly silence. Every single financial analyst, logistics coordinator, and department manager had stood up from their cubicles. Dozens of highly educated corporate professionals lined the central walkway, their eyes wide with shock, watching the spectacle unfold. This was the walk of shame, and the poetic justice of it was absolutely staggering. Less than an hour earlier, my mother had bulldozed her way down this exact same carpeted aisle. She had thrown her weight around, batting away security guards, screaming theatrical prayers to Jesus, and demanding the attention of the entire floor. She had wanted an audience. She had wanted to publicly humiliate me, hoping that the pressure of my coworkers watching would force me to surrender my life savings just to make a scene disappear. Now she had her audience, but she was not the self-righteous matriarch disciplining her disobedient daughter. She was a handcuffed felon being paraded through a gauntlet of silent, staring witnesses. As the FBI agents marched her down the aisle, she tried desperately to hide her face behind her shoulder, weeping uncontrollably. The people she had so loudly interrupted earlier were now looking at her with a mixture of profound pity and absolute disgust. Darius suffered an even worse fate. He had stood in my office and confidently referred to the people working on this floor as corporate slaves. He had mocked my title. He had mocked my salary. He had claimed that his fraudulent rented lifestyle made him vastly superior to anyone who worked a standard 9-to-5 job. Now the very people he had degraded were watching him shuffle toward the freight elevators in federal cuffs. He was exposed as an absolute fraud. There was no blockchain empire. There was no decentralized wealth. He was just a cheap thief who stole from the government and tried to extort his own sister-in-law. As he walked past the glass-walled conference rooms, he kept his eyes glued to his scuffed red-bottom loafers, completely stripped of his massive ego. The silence of the corporate workers was deafening. Nobody took out their phones to record. Nobody laughed. They simply watched him fall. As the agents guided them toward the main elevator bank at the end of the corridor, we passed the executive lounge. I looked through the floor-to-ceiling glass panels and saw Mr. Sterling and Ms. Davis standing near the coffee station. My two multi-million-dollar prospective investors had been waiting exactly where I had left them. They stood frozen, their coffee cups halfway to their mouths. They watched the FBI agents march the criminals right past the lounge windows. Mr. Sterling looked at Darius, taking in the torn suit, the fake watch, and the heavy federal restraints. Then Mr. Sterling shifted his gaze and locked eyes with me as I walked a few paces behind the arresting officers. I did not look away. I did not show an ounce of shame or embarrassment. I held my chin high, maintaining perfect, unflinching eye contact with the billionaire investor. I projected absolute control. I wanted him to see exactly who he was going into business with. I was a woman who could dismantle a federal extortion plot, facilitate a flawless FBI sting operation in the middle of a workday, and not break a single sweat. Mr. Sterling slowly lowered his coffee cup, offering me a subtle, deeply impressed nod of respect. When we finally reached the polished steel doors of the main elevator bank, the agents hit the down button. The illuminated numbers above the doors began to descend. My mother suddenly dug the heels of her expensive shoes deep into the carpet, resisting the agent pulling her forward. She twisted her body around with a desperate, frantic surge of energy, her tear-streaked face turning to look directly at me. The reality of the federal transport van waiting downstairs had finally shattered her profound delusion. "Nia," she wailed, her voice cracking, echoing tragically down the silent corporate corridor. "Nia, please, do not let them do this to me. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them we were just confused about the paperwork. I am your mother. I gave you life. You cannot let your own mother go to prison. Please, baby, I am begging you." She was playing her absolute last card. The emotional manipulation, the biological guilt trip, the desperate plea for a daughter, unconditional loyalty. For 32 years, that exact tone of voice would have broken me. It would have sent me rushing to her side, opening my wallet, apologizing for making her upset, and doing whatever she demanded just to restore the peace. But I felt absolutely nothing. The well of empathy I had reserved for this woman was entirely permanently dry. I stepped slowly forward, stopping just a few feet away from where she stood shivering in her federal restraints. I looked at her smeared makeup, her ruined dress, and the sheer terror in her eyes. I looked over at Darius, who was staring at the floor, too humiliated to even speak. I did not raise my voice. I did not yell. I delivered my final words with a cold, surgical precision that I knew would echo in her mind for the rest of her miserable life. "Enjoy the generational wealth, Mom." I said, my voice completely empty of emotion. My mother's mouth fell open. She let out a sharp, breathless gasp, as if I had physically driven a knife directly into her chest. The finality of my words struck her harder than the steel cuffs on her wrists. She realized in that exact second that she had completely lost me. She had sacrificed her fiercely loyal, successful daughter to protect a pathetic scammer, and now she had absolutely nothing left. The elevator arrived with a loud, cheerful digital chime. The heavy steel doors slid open, revealing the empty, mirrored cabin inside. "Let us go," the lead agent barked, physically pushing Darius forward into the elevator car. The other agent forcefully guided my weeping mother inside, turning her around to face the lobby. Agent Reynolds stepped in last. He looked at me one final time, offering a quick, respectful salute with 2 fingers to the brim of his imaginary hat. "We will be in touch regarding your written statement, Madam Vice President. Have a good afternoon." I nodded once. The steel doors smoothly slid shut, sealing the criminals inside and plunging the elevator car down toward the underground loading dock. They were gone. I stood alone in front of the closed elevator doors for a long, quiet moment. The heavy, chaotic, toxic energy that had polluted my entire morning was completely sucked down the elevator shaft, leaving behind an atmosphere of crisp, unburdened air. The crushing weight of family obligation, the constant gaslighting, the endless demands for my money and my identity had all vanished behind those steel doors. I was finally entirely free. I turned around slowly, facing the long corridor leading back to the bullpen. The entire floor of corporate professionals was still standing quietly watching me. They did not know the exact details of the federal sting, but they knew they had just witnessed their vice president of operations ruthlessly eliminate a massive threat without ever losing her composure. I took a deep, steadying breath, filling my lungs with the cool air conditioning of the executive suite. I reached up and adjusted the lapels of my blazer, ensuring the fabric was perfectly smooth and aligned. I rolled my shoulders back, restoring my flawless corporate posture. I began walking back toward my glass-walled office. As I approached the center of the bullpen, my young assistant Maya stepped nervously out from behind her desk. She was clutching a digital tablet to her chest, her eyes wide with shock and awe. "Ms. Nia," she stammered, her voice shaking slightly. "Are you all right? Do you need me to call the building manager or the legal department?" I offered Maya a calm, reassuring smile. "Everything is perfectly fine, Maya. The trash has been securely removed from the premises." I paused, looking briefly toward the glass walls of the executive lounge where Mr. Sterling and Miss Davis were still waiting. "Please go down to the lounge," I instructed my assistant, my voice projecting crisp, unshaken professionalism across the quiet floor. "Apologize to Mr. Sterling and Miss Davis for the unfortunate delay. Tell them I need exactly 20 minutes to review the final quarterly projection spreadsheets. Then reschedule the supply chain expansion meeting for right after lunch. We have a multi-million-dollar deal to close today, and I do not intend to keep them waiting any longer." Maya nodded rapidly, a look of profound respect washing over her face. "Right away, Miss Nia." I walked past her, stepping back into the quiet sanctuary of my glass-walled office. I closed the door, sat down in my leather executive chair, and opened my laptop. It was time to get back to work. And I did exactly that. 1 month later, the frantic, terrifying energy of that Tuesday morning felt like a distant, hazy nightmare. I stood on the wraparound wooden porch of my newly purchased, beautiful 3-bedroom home in a quiet, leafy suburb of Smyrna, just outside of Atlanta. The morning air was crisp and smelled of fresh pine and blooming magnolias. I held a steaming mug of black coffee in my hands, feeling the comforting heat seep into my palms. I looked out over the perfectly manicured front lawn, listening to the gentle rustling of the wind through the old oak trees. There were no screaming matches. There were no frantic phone calls demanding my attention. There were no surprise visits from people looking to drain my resources. There was only absolute, profound peace. The $120,000 I had fought so fiercely to protect went exactly where it was always supposed to go. It went straight to the escrow company. I signed the real estate closing documents 2 weeks after the FBI sting operation. When the closing agent handed me the heavy brass keys to the front door, I did not just feel a standard sense of homeownership. I felt a massive, overwhelming sense of liberation. This house was my permanent sanctuary. Every red brick, every hardwood floorboard, every glass window pane was paid for with my own blood, sweat, and late nights at the office. Nobody could claim it. Nobody could secretly mortgage it behind my back. Nobody could threaten to take it away from me. It was entirely, unquestionably mine. The justice system moved with surprising, brutal efficiency when the evidence was that undeniable. The fallout for my family was absolute and completely devastating. Darius and Chloe and their fraudulent empire collapsed into dust overnight. The moment Darius realized the FBI had the audio recording of his extortion attempt, his tough, visionary businessman persona evaporated. He immediately tried to strike a plea deal by throwing my sister under the bus, claiming she was the mastermind behind the forged documents. Chloe, in return, turned right back on him. She cried to the federal prosecutors that she was just a naive wife manipulated by a controlling husband. The prosecutors did not care about their domestic drama, because they had actively attempted to launder stolen government funds offshore while already out on bail. The federal judge denied any further bond. They are currently sitting in separate federal detention centers, both facing a mandatory minimum of 15 years in federal prison. There are no silk sheets, no luxury cars, and no designer extensions where they are going. My mother faced a different kind of prison, one perfectly tailored to her specific brand of narcissism. She avoided jail time due to her age and lack of prior criminal history, but she was indicted on felony accessory charges and placed under strict, indefinite house arrest. She is currently wearing a bulky black GPS ankle monitor that tracks her every single movement. But her true punishment was the absolute total destruction of her social standing. When the local Atlanta news networks picked up the story of the federal fraud ring, they broadcasted the exact details of how she helped steal her own daughter's identity. The church community she had worshipped, the village she had threatened to use against me, abandoned her immediately. Pastor Thomas released a public statement disavowing her actions, stating that the congregation does not support financial manipulation or criminal behavior under any circumstances. The women in her sorority chapter stopped calling her. Her neighbors stopped waving when she walked out to get the mail. She is entirely alone in that house, trapped with nothing but her own bitter reflections and the crushing weight of her public humiliation. She built her entire identity on maintaining a flawless image, and now everyone knows exactly who she really is. The psychological healing process for me was not instantaneous. You do not just walk away from 3 decades of emotional abuse without carrying some of the scars. In the first few weeks in my new home, I experienced a strange, hollow kind of grief. I was not grieving the people who stood in my office that day. I was grieving the mother I never had. I mourned the sisterly bond I had always hoped to build, but was never actually possible. I had to sit alone in my living room with the painful reality that I had spent my entire life trying to earn the love of people who viewed my success not as a point of pride, but as a resource to be harvested. It is a terrifying realization when you understand that the people assigned to protect you from the world are actually the ones you need the most protection from. But as the days passed, that grief slowly transformed into a deep, unshakable empowerment. I realized that setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty, it is an act of survival. Society places an enormous, unfair burden on the victims of toxic families. We are constantly told to forgive and forget. We are conditioned to believe that bloodlines demand infinite loyalty, regardless of the disrespect, the theft, or the emotional violence we endure. We are told to keep the peace, even when it means going to war with ourselves. But I learned the hard way that toxic bloodlines are just that. Toxic. Cutting them off is not a loss. It is the ultimate gain. You cannot heal in the exact same environment that made you sick. You cannot thrive when you are constantly being drained by people who refuse to carry their own weight. I no longer walk on eggshells. I no longer flinch when my phone rings. I sleep deeply through the night, knowing that my financial future is secure and my boundaries are made of reinforced steel. I lost my biological family, but I gained myself. I gained my absolute freedom. And sitting here on my porch watching the morning sun rise over my own property, I know with absolute certainty that I made the right choice. My life is quiet now, but it is a beautiful, hard-earned quiet. I fill my space with friends who respect me, colleagues who value my expertise, and a profound, unwavering love for the woman I fought so hard to become. Have you ever had to protect your peace from the people who were supposed to protect you? Have you ever had to draw a hard line in the sand with family members who expected you to sacrifice your own happiness for their convenience? The guilt they try to place on your shoulders is heavy, but it does not belong to you. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to build a beautiful life and refuse to let anyone tear it down, no matter who they are or what title they hold in your family tree. If my story resonated with you, I want you to know that you are not alone in this fight. I want to hear your stories. Go down into the comments below and share your experiences. How did you break free from a toxic family dynamic? How did you find the strength to enforce your boundaries when everyone around you told you that you were wrong? Your story might be the exact thing someone else needs to hear today to finally take their own power back. Building a community of strong, independent survivors is the best way we can heal together. If you found value in this journey, please hit the like button. It helps push this message out to others who might be secretly struggling in the dark. Subscribe to the channel so we can continue to grow and navigate these difficult conversations together. Thank you for listening. Thank you for validating the hard choices we have to make to protect our future. Remember that your worth is not determined by how much you can give to people who only know how to take. Your worth is inherent. You deserve peace, you deserve respect, and you deserve to enjoy the fruits of your own labor without apology. Keep standing tall, keep protecting your energy, and never let anyone make you feel guilty for walking away from a table where respect is no longer being served. I will see you all in the next video. Stay strong, stay focused, and always remember to protect your peace.